one may observe the interstellar spacecraft Avalon traveling in space on its way to Homestead 2, a colonized world. The ship is on autopilot, and every room is vacant. Both the 5,000 passengers and the 258 staff members are hibernating. Abruptly, the ship's defenses are weakened as it travels through an asteroid belt. The spacecraft is headed for a collision with a behemoth, but power is being redirected to the primary shield. The asteroid and the spacecraft clash abruptly, leading to a number of problems. One of the sleep pods activates while the spacecraft starts self-reparations. Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer, is the passenger who has been woken. An automatic device assists him in waking up when his pod opens, informing him that he has been in suspended animation for 120 years and that the spacecraft is just 4 months away reaching Homestead 2. He is informed that he can take advantage of the ship's opulent features at that period. Jim is given instructions before he arrives on the planet regarding his ID band, his cabin, and the main activities he is expected to engage in. Excited and anxious to meet the ship's crew, he prepares, exits his cabin, and enters an automated classroom designed for a whole learning group. Jim is a little nervous as the hologram describes the state of affairs on Earth, describing it as overcrowded, costly, and overdone. Jim persists in asking why, even though it instructs him to save his queries till the end of the class. The only one there is him. He begins looking for other individuals after realizing that the hologram is unable to respond to him. He arrives at the ship's main concourse. An automated information desk provides assistance, but no one is present either. When Jim requests to speak with a real person, he is sent to speak with a steward. But when he discovers that no one else is around, he requests to speak with the captain instead. He finds that none of the primary crew is awake when he arrives at the bridge, despite the fact that he is unable to enter. After a while, Jim visits the observatory and discovers that the spacecraft is, in fact, 90 years distant from Homestead 2. Since he doesn't know how to go back into hibernation, he recognizes that he got up too early and quickly returns to the concourse before sending a message back to Earth wondering what to do. He is told by the communication system that it would take around 55 years to receive a response to the expensive call to Earth. Jim is inconsolable. After wandering around, he comes upon another individual at the ship's bar. Something about him appears off when he speaks to the bartender. Jim discovers he's an android when he tries to bring him a drink. Arthur is the name of it. Jim wants to ask him more questions, but he is unable to even explain to the robot how he might be there before him. The following day, Jim awakens in his accommodation and heads to the cantina, where he soon discovers that the majority of the menu items are exclusive to gold-class travelers. After getting his basic coffee, he attempts to mend his hibernation chamber. He gathers all the necessary equipment, gets everything working, and lies down inside the pod. However, nothing occurs. He then makes the decision to enter the crew's sleep chambers using the items he discovered. That also doesn't work. Minor issues occur throughout the ship. Jim keeps coming back to the pub, largely to chat with Arthur, but also to drink. He is persuaded to break into one of the gold classrooms and attempt to enjoy himself on board. By the advice the robot provides him, Jim checks out every eatery, game, and entertainment system. But as time goes on, being there by himself makes him even more miserable. While wandering around the sleep pods one day after drinking too much, he stumbles into an airlock that has spacesuits meant for spacewalks. Jim puts on a suit, walks up to the airlock, and presses a lever and a button to open the entrance. He is captivated by the vista as soon as he steps off the ship. He is the only human being who is aware of that particular point in time. Devastated, Jim lets go of the magnets on his boots and floats in space. Returning inside, he removes the suit, but returns to the airlock without it. As he pulls the button to put an end to it all, he had a last-minute change of heart, dashes back inside, and puts on a bottle. Jim gets to his feet and is immediately attracted to Aurora, a woman in one of the pods. After listening to her passenger interview and looking over her files in the directory, he falls in love with her. He was then spotted listening to her interviews while seated next to her pod. He's discussing her writing with Arthur while reading some of her pieces back at the pub. The irony of his circumstances, waking up early and failing to achieve his destination, traveling to another planet in search of a better life, and discovering his ideal girlfriend only to find her out of reach, becomes his obsession. Jim begins to feel the want to wake her up as well since he can't stop thinking about her. He discusses it with the robot, but he's unable to comprehend the dilemma. He would be leaving her there with him to perish on the ship if he woke her up for his own gain. Jim first chooses not to, but as time passes, he finds it impossible to let go, until he decides to alter his views one day. He approaches her pod and successfully turns it on. He hides and returns to his room when she wakes up and begins the same procedure he did. He travels to the main concourse a little while later in the hopes of finding her, and now, there she is, as perplexed as he was a year before. Jim brings her to the observatory and assures her that they are the only ones awake. He then informs her that he is unable to reach the ship's primary commands or the crew. In a panic, Aurora wants to return to her pod. When they reach there, Jim tells her that they are trapped since the spacecraft does not have any specific technology that can let them go back into sleep. When they return to the concourse, he advises her to take it easy because she's just emerged from hibernation, since he must spend over a year alone himself aboard the ship. She feels bad for him. Jim feels bad about what he did and returns to the pub. He requests that Arthur keep the fact that he awakened Aurora up a secret. The following day, Aurora awakens. Returning to the concourse, she queries the automated information desk on the hibernation pods. They go for brunch when Jim joins her there. The information desk is malfunctioning as they depart. After noticing that Jim has been eating the same breakfast for over a year, Aurora orders him one of the gold-class meals at the cantina. They discuss the prospect of fixing the pods, but Aurora isn't prepared to give up as Jim is. After looking through research materials in the hospital, she finally comes to an end, trying to force the doors open at the crew's hibernation quarters. Jim observes other ship issues. After a while, Aurora regrets her existence aboard the Avalon. As she writes, jogs around the ship, and swims in the pool, she's increasingly conscious of her predicament. She believes Jim's story would be fascinating, so she goes to the cantina to interview him. Why did he come to the colony, she asks. Jim responds with company mantras at first, then goes on to say that he hopes that he might establish a life and become famous in the New World. They eventually get at the observatory, where Aurora eventually explains why she is there. She has a round-trip ticket, unlike the other passengers aboard the ship. Her plan was to become the first journalist to visit Homestead 2, stay there for a year, and then return to Earth to write the best story ever. Jim finds a means to make Aurora feel better when she gradually gives up on finding a solution to their present situation. She is unable to forgive him for killing her. Jim is at his cabin one night when another issue occurs. The primary command shuts down when the spacecraft encounters a critical error. Later, when he enters the elevator, it breaks down. Jim has planted a tree in the main concourse, which Aurora notices as she enters. The food dispensary at the cantina is also broken when she arrives. Over the communications, they both hear the deck chief's voice inquiring who planted the tree. Gus Mancuso is standing in front of Jim's tree as they both dash onto the concourse. They eat, sleep, and work out together. Jim keeps exploring the spacecraft and finds the hydroponics section. He presents Aurora with flowers. One day, as the ship passes by, they go to the observatory to see a red giant. Before going to the bar later that night, they celebrate Aurora's birthday in a number of the ship's eateries. Jim goes to the bathroom to prepare for the ring he made for Aurora, who is still in the bar conversing with Arthur. The android tells Aurora that Jim intentionally woke her up, not understanding that he was still to hide such facts. Jane is shocked when Jim suddenly reappears and confronts him. She runs away in a fit of wrath. Everything she had is gone when Jim gets back to his cabin. He runs into her in the cantina the next day, but she runs away the moment he speaks. Aurora is in a terrible place. One night, she goes to Jim's cabin and begins beating and kicking him because she wants to kill him. She keeps avoiding Jim, so he attempts to apologize and explain his actions to her over the phone. He informs Aurora that he fell in love with her, but Aurora doesn't care. She can't forgive him for taking her life. One night, Jim is at his cabin when another problem arises. When a critical fault occurs in the spaceship, the main command shuts down. Later, the elevator malfunctions as he gets inside. As Aurora approaches the main concourse, she discovers that Jim has planted a tree there. When she gets there, the cantina's food dispensary is likewise damaged. They both hear the deck chief asking who planted the tree over the comms. Jim and Gus Mancuso run onto the concourse with Gus standing in front of Jim's tree. They give the chief an introduction and explain the circumstances. How 3 pods could fail is beyond him. When Mancuso brings them to the bridge, he finds that the spacecraft is having problems, but the data on the systems needs to be manually verified. They inform Mancuso that problems have been occurring more regularly across the ship when a robot nearly falls on their heads as they exit the bridge. As he demonstrates how to gather the data, he says that shouldn't occur. Jim meets Mancuso at the pods to see how they're doing. He has discovered what transpired with Aurora's pod. Jim did something horrible, according to the deck chief. Later, Aurora meets him at the bridge to verify the data that has been gathered. When they discuss what transpired with her pod, he informs her that there is nothing he can do. Jim enters with the 16th malfunctioning robot. Mancuso goes to rest after experiencing hibernation sickness, but he coughs up blood as he leaves. Aurora swims that night since she can't sleep. She begins to drown as the water from the pool moves with her and the ship abruptly loses gravity. She narrowly survives when the gravity drive resets. On their way to locate Mancuso, they both bump into one another. Back at the bridge, the 3 of them are gradually learning more about the ship's recent events. Mancuso discovers that a significant system was removed 2 years ago. Since the entire ship is attempting, they must identify and address the cause of the failure to fill up the gaps. The entire ship will be stuck if they don't fix it. Jim and Aurora take Mancuso to the infirmary when he faints, while they are out trying to identify the issue. There are no medicines that can stop his death or extend his remaining time. When the 3 of them finally meet in the observatory, Mancuso hands Jim his ID bracelet, instructs them to fix the spacecraft, and then instantly passes away. Abruptly, the ship begins to tremble as the lights turn a frightening crimson. They rush to engineering when Jim informs Aurora that he needs her assistance, but There's another. The gravity drive failed. And right away, Arthur is also affected by another one. Jim turns him off. When they eventually get to engineering, they begin to search for the issue. Aurora is swept in as they open the hatch after discovering it in the power plant. That part of the hull has been breached by the asteroid. Jim is also drawn in, but he manages to hang onto the hatch as it continues to close in on him. He eventually falls in as well, but they are able to close the gap in time. Jim immediately discovers that there are several breaches in the system after resolving that issue. After tracking the meteor's path, the two discover that the meteor struck the reactor control computer. Jim believes he can locate substitute components for it. They locate the component and replace it, but the reactor venting procedure is still unsuccessful. They try doing it by hand, but it keeps failing. Jim determines that in order to cool the reactor, he must open the vent door from the exterior of the spacecraft. They both head to the airlock, and he hands Aurora Mancuso's bracelet as he prepares to leave because he might not return. As he enters the airlock after she assists him with the suit, she urges him to return because she cannot survive on the ship without him. When the temperature reaches critical levels, Aurora returns to the reactor. As Jim approaches the vent from the outside and notices the door, a bolt from the reactor shoots into her arm. As he tries to open the vent door by avoiding it, the temperature in the reactor room rises. He quickly learns that in order for the reactor to vent, he will need to physically hold the door open. He then informs Aurora. He orders her to vent the reactor, even though she objects to the proposal. He reminds her that they must save the others, and she vents the reactor since she doesn't want him to die. Although the procedure is effective, Jim is pushed aside and becomes agitated by the reactor's emissions. His suit's pressure is also decreasing. Aurora quickly gets to another suit and brings him in after he tells her what occurred. Once more, he apologizes to her. Her leash is too short, so she dons a costume and sets off to fetch him. After being dragged back, she manages to get hold of his rope and draw him closer. Jim is already dead when Aurora carries him inside the hospital. She resuscitates Mancuso by circumventing medical procedures and using his wristband. Jim is brought back to life automatically by the medical pod. Aurora pardons him. Arthur is later fixed by Aurora, and Mancuso is given a dignified space funeral. Jim tells her he's figured out how to utilize the medical pod as he leads her to the hospital, as one that hibernates. He instructs her to board the pod and spend the remainder of the trip there. However, she rejects and chooses to remain awake aboard the ship with him, as is subsequently disclosed. After Jim eventually pops the question, they spend the rest of their lives aboard the ship. The Avalon shows up on Homestead 2, 88 years later. When the crew awakens, they discover the ship in a rather surprising condition. While the others were sleeping, Aurora left them a note in which she recounted the life she and Jim had on the ship.